All right, in today's video, we're going to look at a different type of equation that deals with graphing, and it's called standard form. So sometimes you're going to see that equations don't always have the form y equals mx plus b. So we're going to look at how we convert from standard form to slope-intercept. So make sure you put today's date in the top corner of your notes, and then let's get started. So standard form of an equation looks like this. ax plus by equals c. So some number times x plus some number times b equals another number. What we're going to do is we're going to convert this from standard form to slope-intercept form. And the steps to do that you're either going to add or subtract. Let's put steps to convert. So we have standard form, ax plus by equals c, and we're going to convert from standard to slope-intercept form. So here are those steps that we're going to take. So you're either going to add or subtract ax to move it to the other side. So whatever this term is, the ax term, you're either going to add it or subtract it depending on the sign. You'll do the undo of this term to get it from this side to this side. Because remember, when there's an equal sign, if we want to move something over, we have to undo it by adding or subtracting it to the other side. Then you want to divide all the terms by the b value. So whatever that number is for b, after we've subtracted or added ax to the other side, then we'll divide everything by b. So as we look at some practical applications of this, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. After we're done graphing or converting, then you'll be able to graph these in slope-intercept form. And that's the whole point, is that we want to get back to slope-intercept form where we can graph the equations. So let's look at some examples. Let's say I gave you the equation x plus y equals -5. So I can tell that this isn't in slope-intercept form because the y isn't solved for. The y isn't all by itself on one side of the equation. So I need to undo and get this to the other side of the equation. So remember, my first step was to either add or subtract the ax term. And in this case, a would be 1, and b would also be 1. Generally, you don't write the ones because you don't need to, because we know that 1 times x is still that number. So since this is positive, I'm going to subtract it to the other side. And then this is where all of our time first semester comes into play with combining like terms. So the -5 minus 1x is not like terms, right? We can't combine these. So the way that I write this is what's left over here is I have the 1y is equal to -1x minus 5. Since I can't combine these, I just write them down. And then you could divide everything by negative or positive 1. So I would get -x minus 5. And now that's in a format that we're used to because it's slope-intercept form. I can plot the y-intercept, and I can use the slope of -1 to graph it. Let's look at another example. Let's say I gave you negative 4x plus y equals 7. Going back to our steps, we either add or subtract the ax term, whatever the x term is, and move it to the other side. So since this is minus or negative 4x, I'm going to undo it by adding 4x to both sides. These cancel out, which is the point. I have y left over. And remember, this isn't like terms, so I have to write it down as I see it. I have positive 4x plus 7. You could put a 1 in front of here like we did in this problem and then divide everything by 1, but we don't need to because this is just going to give us the same answer here. So now I've got that in slope-intercept form. So for each example, we move the x term by either adding or subtracting it to both sides of the equal sign. When we got to this side, we were unable to combine like terms, so we just wrote down the equation as we saw it. And then we divided by the number in front of y, which in these two examples it was 1, so it doesn't change the value of our equations. Let's look at when we have a different value for y. Okay, let's say I gave you this equation. Negative 2x plus 4y equals negative 12. So we're going to start by undoing the x value, which means I have to add 2x to both sides of the equation. This will cancel. So I have 4y equals 2x minus 12. Remember, I'm just writing these two things down together because I can't combine them. Now, this time there's a value in front of y, so I have to divide away that value to each term. So 4 divided by 4 is y, 1y. 2/4, I can simplify this, right? 2 divided by 4 is really 1 over 2. Then the x term. And then 12 divided by 4 is 3. And there's a minus sign in front of it because it's a minus 12. So my final answer there is y equals 1/2 x minus 3. So I moved the 2x to both sides and then divided everything by 4 to get my equation in slope-intercept form. Let's try one last example. Let's do 6x minus 3y equals 15. So remember, our goal is to get y by itself. So we're going to follow our steps and subtract away the x term, because this time it's positive, so we have to undo it by subtracting it. That goes away. I have negative 3y equals negative 6x plus 15. Again, these are not like terms, so I'm just writing them down as kind of like a sentence. From there, I can divide every term by negative 3. So y equals negative 6 divided by negative 3 is positive 2x. 15 divided by negative 3 is negative 5. So y equals 2x minus 5. Let's take a look at one more example, and then I think you're ready to convert from standard form to slope-intercept. Okay, last example. This is example number 5. Let's say I gave you this equation, 5x plus 6y equals 18. Follow our steps. So our first step is to undo or either add or subtract the ax term. So that means we're going to have to subtract here. We're undoing it. So I have 6y equals negative 5x plus 18. Now I divide by what's in front of the y term from everything. So 6 divided by 6 is 1y. So here's where you're going to run into some problems. There's going to be numbers you can't divide or simplify. So we just leave it as a fraction because 5 divided by 6 is not a nice number. And I also can't reduce that. So I just leave it as negative 5 over 6. And then 18 divided by 6 is 3. So now I've got my equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, so that's graphing, or excuse me, that's converting from standard form to slope-intercept form, which the whole point is that we get to an equation where we can graph the line.